Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a returning good brother to the temple, coming in for the first time in about 5 years. One of the earliest folk who gave me a chance when I still had no idea what I was doing. Arguably still don't. From the wonderful world of our Telsorian games, previously to talk about the full catalog, now more specifically to cover the single-player mode expansion for Cyberpunk Red, the one and only Jay Gray. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you for ending the long streak when it came to this. But so first off, I do want to congratulate you on getting this thing out there. I believe it's now out and publicly available.
It is, yes, over at Drive-Thru-RPG as a digital product and a print-on-demand.
Yep. For those of you watching this stream on YouTube, the link for the thing is on Drive-Thru-RPG. I had to put one link in, so I had to go with the one that was going to work. And for those of you watching on Twitch, let me put the link there for you. And let me pin that for the duration of this stream. Really should do these things in advance, but oh well. The whole pinning a comment thing is something I'm working on. But you kind of go into this on the first page, but I kind of want to get into your first introduction to the idea of solo play. What was essentially your first solo RPG in that sense?
Oh gosh, so that goes back a long time ago. Actually, technically speaking, I played solo RPGs before I got to play in person with people RPGs. Because if you go back in the day, a man named Joe Deaver.
I know where this is going. I know.
Yeah, wrote a series of novels set called the Lone Wolf series, and they were really my introduction because I had done Choose Your Own Adventure, and Choose Your Own Adventure is nice. Read to the point. Yeah. Do you choose this? Go to page blah. Do you choose this? Go to page blah. Lone Wolf was that, but it added a randomization mechanic and stats so that you can make your character so your lone wolf was different from somebody else's lone wolf depending on what skills you took. And then there was a chance that you would succeed or fail, and had a simple combat system. So, for example, you might come across a locked door, and you might have 3 or 4 different ways to open the door depending on your abilities, whether you had them, whether you didn't have them, and you would go different pages depending on them. So that was the first time I did anything that was like single player. That's a more classic thing you'll still see. We had a choose your own adventure style like in Teenagers from Outer Space, and there's something kind of similar to it in a couple of RPGs as a way for people to learn the game, especially in starter boxes. For the kind of single player Oracle based system that we have in here, that's much more recent. I've been wanting to do it for about 5 years now, pretty much since we started doing Cyberpunk. But it took a little while to find someone because while I could do it myself, I'm not a specialist. We needed a specialist to make this, make sure it was the best book it could be, because it's just always good to have someone who knows what they're doing write the stuff.
Oh yeah. So you already mentioned Lone Wolf, which
yes.
As an aside, I have been listening to the Journeys Through Magnamon podcast, which has been very insightful on some of the intentions, some of the ideas with the various books, as well as some of the lore that Deaver had written, and just the extent of how widespread the fan base is for the game, as well as how hands-on Deaver was for the RPG adaptations for both the Mongoose one in the D20 era and the Cubicle 7 one. I know we've got another one coming that's using Dragonbane, which actually makes sense. Lone Wolf is pretty big in Sweden.
Yeah, it really does.
And honestly, Dragonbane is a pretty simple game, so it's a natural fit.
Yeah, and Dragonbane is also one where it's got a strong solo play.
Yeah, there's a solo
system
option in the core box set.
Yes.
But there are a couple other standouts within game books that I'd like to know if you had dipped into them at any point, if there was a story that you had with these. And I'm not going to be digging into the forest of all knowledge for these. These are going to be pretty obvious ones, but
I'm gonna guess. Fighting Fantasy by Steve Jackson, and sometimes also by Steve Jackson.
Yeah. Steve Jackson was Revolver Ocelot before Revolver Ocelot, played by Revolver Ocelot.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, the Fighting Fantasy books were written by a UK author named Steve Jackson, and there is, of course, a American game designer named Steve Jackson. And later in the series, the American Steve Jackson actually did write, I believe, 1 or 2 of those. And I believe now they just acquired the license to publish them in the US again, reprint them. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, I did some Fighting Fantasies. I did, I can't remember what they were called. There were a couple that you had to have 2 books, and they were designed to be played between
Lost
2 people.
Worlds. Lost Worlds, that was by Flying Buffalo.
Yeah, I did a couple of those by myself because I had no one to play with back when I was a kid. And there was a post-apocalyptic kind of car one that I did that I can't remember. And I did
Chainsaw Warrior.
Yeah, I did the Lone Wolf spinoff, which was Greyhawk. No, Greyhawk
was the D&D setting.
The
Lone Wolf spinoff I'm thinking was you're thinking of Grey Wizard.
Great, yeah, it was more magically based as opposed to monk based.
Yeah, it's funny that people have made the monk association with Lone Wolf, because the whole thing was based on Deaver's D&D campaigns, and the Lone Wolf character was this hybrid of Ranger and Scion, which is absolutely hilarious to me, knowing how much of a busted mess Psionics was in the early days.
Oh, but yeah, by the way, because no one has gotten this yet, and I'll share with you and reveal it. If you go to page 90 of single player mode, you will find a diceless dice table, which allows you to close your eyes and point and roll a die essentially in that system, and that is the D10 portion of it, because there's a D10 portion and a D6 portion. The D10 portion is a perfect replica of the page from the first Lone Wolf novel, which I still have.
Mhm. Yeah, and fortunately, while there's the definitive editions, there's also the entire catalog downloadable through Project Aeon.
Yes.
But I suppose there's a couple others I could bring up when it comes to this. One of them being the Fantasy Trip, which was a game book like thing that was under the Steve Jackson banner.
And available today because Steve Jackson got his rights back after a couple of years ago and is publishing it again.
Yep. This was another one that I really end up hearing quite a lot about, and it got an RPG adaptation a while back. Blood Sword.
That one I did not play.
Yep. And I think there was one other that I was going to bring up, but that's going way too much into the weeds. And we already brought up Fighting Fantasy. Oh, now I remember the other one of the other chestnuts by Livingstone, Death Trap Dungeon.
Don't think I played that one. I was kind of stuck with whatever was either in my local library or on the shelf at Walden Books. So there was a certain number of limits. And at that point, everyone was doing choose your own adventures. So TSR had TSR not only had their D&D based choose your own adventures, but they had fantasy romance based choose your own adventures too, which I didn't play, but I wish I had because those must have been amazing. And then there were Zork ones based on the text adventure and all kinds. It was a wild west of people doing
I haven't
or without mechanics.
There is one setting that I haven't found a choose your own adventure version of it yet, aside from the PC game, which I don't count for the purpose of this. That I'm actually surprised didn't happen, or I just haven't found it yet, and that is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
There wasn't, though there was a series that were all basically tied into various classics of science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I remember each one was essentially a sequel to a novel done as a choose your own adventures. Kyle, there was one that was based off Glory Road. There was one based off the Pern novels. There was one. There were a couple of them, and those were great because I hadn't at that point read most of the originals because I was too young, and so that's how I was introduced. For example, to Heinlein was through those books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, getting into the idea of adapting Cyberpunk Red into solo rules. There are some games that can easily handle solo rules, and there's some games that aren't. And you've got guys like Alex T who build all his games around solo play from the word go. But obviously, Cyberpunk is built with a party in mind. So one of the foundation things I'd like to get into is how easy is it to convert an existing player character from Cyberpunk Red proper into solo play and vice versa.
Okay, so the first, you can play with as many characters as you want. For example, Peter Norton, the primary author of single player mode. If you go to Holopon Saga, Solo Sagas, on his YouTube channel and watch his Cyberpunk Red actual play, he has like a 3-person party, which is occasionally a 4-person party, where he plays them all. And so you do that. You can also do regular. It's exactly the same. There are no differences. It layers onto the existing Cyberpunk Red rule set, so there are no specific differences. You don't make the character a different way. We do say that if you're playing with just one character, if you want to, feel free to give them multiple roles. For example, to essentially do what you do with V in 2077, where V is a solo who can also do tech stuff, who can also do net running stuff. Because you're a one-person party, feel free to give them some net running abilities and some tech abilities or med tech or whatever you want. That's the only thing we say that's at all different from normal base Cyberpunk. It is the game does not change for the solo rules. The solo rules are not. They're not actually rules. They're a system for playing solo with suggestions on how to handle a guide to how to handle things like answering questions. Because when it's like you run into an obstacle, the GM says you run into a wall and you say, "Can I climb over the wall?" And the GM says yes or no, or make a roll. It answers that question for you. And then it says basically fills as a GM emulator. So it fills in the roles, the parts of a GM through random generation systems. But the system, the base rules themselves don't change. The combat rules stay the same. The net running rules, the healing rules, the character rules, they're all the same. There is no difference. It doesn't simplify it or change it. The game runs perfectly well, whether you have a GM or not.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, since you mentioned multiple roles, I think early on you make note that as tempting as it would be to just have your character be a solo, that's not necessarily a requirement or the best idea, depending on the solo adventure you're doing.
We ran into that problem early on as I was working on the manuscript. I came to realization, hey, what the style of play is traditionally called solo play doesn't work for Cyberpunk particularly well, because we have solos, and solo play here would confuse people, and that's why it's single player mode and not solo mode. And make the character you want to make. You want to play a tech, you play a tech. You want to play a netrunner, play a netrunner. You can always adjust, just like a GM can at a table, at a person table, how much combat. You can have as much combat as you want, little combat, simplified combat, weaker enemies. You control the flow of the story. And you, just like if I were running a game and everybody at my table was playing more of an investigator and social, I would lean into social and investigation play, and I wouldn't pull out combat that often. Whereas if everyone was making combat-oriented characters, I will pull out combat more. You just do the same thing. You adjust the game for your style.
Now, with that in mind, since you brought up combat, let's dive into that.
Okay.
In a lot of solo games, when combat happens, it's usually under the assumption that you're only really controlling or caring about the player character, the one person you have a hand in. But since you've talked about how you could bring in multiple people or have multiple participants, how do you balance that when it comes to doing combat in solo play without it getting too overwrought or just feeling like a bit much for one person to handle?
Well, so there's a couple of different ways you can handle it. First of all, you can run it normal combat, and that's, you run it just like you would from the base rule set. We do suggest that you make sure the combat is something you want to happen. Peter puts it very well, where he says, think of it like a movie. Every fight in a movie has a purpose, which is to drive the story forward. There is generally no, they don't throw it in for laughs, or even if it's a funny scene. It's designed to tell part of the story. They don't have the time, they don't have the budget to just throw in extraneous combat. Same thing here. Make sure the combat has a goal. So that's the first step. Make sure you know what the goal of the combat is. Is the goal of the combat to get information out of are they fighting you until you get one guy down and you're getting information out of them? Are you driving people off? Are you trying to escape them? Know what the goal of the scene is, and that helps you know when to cut things off. And you can cut things off through, we have a morale system in single player mode, which is basically we say, okay, what is the point? And ties into NPCs more than PCs, because you make the decisions for the PCs. For the NPCs, we say, what is the point at which the NPCs, because very few people in the real world are going to fight to the death unless they have no choice. They're going to run away, they're going to surrender. What is the point at which they will? Will it be, mechanically speaking, for example, when half or more of their party dies, when they reach half their hit points, for whatever, or is it a story point, which is like they'll fight for 3 rounds and then they'll run, or they'll fight until they hear sirens in the distance, and then they'll run, or they'll surrender. Know what that is, and then so you can end the combat not in the what could be tedious long term playing for a long time. Okay, back and forth until everyone dies on one side. You can play for 3 rounds and say, okay, we've fulfilled the requirement. Let's see if they use the morale system to see if they surrender and or try to escape, and end the combat that way. And the great thing is when you're playing at a table and the NPCs try to escape, there's this tendency where PCs are like, no, we're going to run them down and we're going to fight them. And then the combat keeps going. You're trying to go, guys, I'm trying to end the combat so we can get to the next part, please. Here, you have control over that. You can say, yeah, the story makes sense that they run away and they get away now because my PCs don't want to chase them. So that's one way. The other way is for combat that matters less. Say you create a random encounter and you just come across some gangers on the street and the play evolves into a combat. We have what we call a quick and dirty combat system, which is a truncated combat system. We don't recommend it for major story encounters, but for minor story encounters and random encounters, it's a good way to quickly decide the outcome of a combat, including potential damage to your player characters in a much shorter span of time than a regular combat.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and if you don't mind, I'd like to put things through a few paces.
Sure.
So before I ask this, I do have to ask one preparation question. Have you seen the film The Raid?
Sorry, which film?
The Raid.
No, I have not.
Because what I was thinking of is if you're dealing with a storming the castle kind of moment in a given mission. So something that would be similar to a fight scene in, say, The Raid or Tony Jaa's The Protector, or even the hospital shootout in Hard Boiled, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody wanted to do that kind of thing, how would you suggest they do it within the single player mode rule set?
It depends on preferences. As everybody knows, the reason why fortifications are so effective is because they are hard to assault.
Yeah.
First of all, what's your goal? Your goal is to get inside. What are your obstacles? Well, your obstacles are there's a turret and a bunch of guys. And so the first question is that the way I want to go? Am I going directly for that? I got to try to sneak around the back. I'm going to try to go to the sewers. What are your options? You decide that as the person in charge of the game, what they're going to do. Say you decide that you are going to go straight in and you're going to start with, taking a car and smashing it into the front of the building.
Mm-hmm.
Because, cars make effective siege weapons, especially if you pack them with explosives. And so, you start with, it's very simple. The combat goes, I would give it like a round or two for the car to get from point A to smashing into the building. And in that round, the bad guys are probably shooting the car to try to keep the car from smashing into the building. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, can they do enough damage to stop the car or cause it to flip, whatever? And then I would move on to the actual combat. This sounds like an important story point. I'm not going to randomly encounter a building I want to storm for no reason, right? So I would play this out as a full combat. But what I would do is I would set parameters for the end game, which is to say, at what point do these guys realize that the mooks that are guarding the castle, call it the castle for ease of terms, what point do the guys in the castle realize that the fight outside is lost? And this is a thing that happens in real sieges, right? The fight outside is lost, so they retreat inside to set up further obstacles, or to or leave entirely. And I would say, let's nice and simple. When say there's equal number of them to members of the party plus a turret. So say there's 4 people in the party, there's 4 bad guys, there's one there's one automated turret. So I'm going to say when the turret is out, and the turret being the biggest threat because it's the one that shoots grenades. When the turret is out and 2 of the 4 guys reach half their hit points, someone will order a retreat. And that way I know I'm not fighting on and on and on until everyone is at 0 hit points and everyone fails their death save. I'm fighting towards a specific end. And if I feel that, the combat's particularly brutal, maybe like I've inflicted several critical injuries on the bad guys, I stop and I hit that morale chart earlier than I expected. So I'm flexible there. But that would be the big thing, is I would know what my end point is. I know when the bad guys do the escape, do the end of combat. What is the end of combat result trigger, and then run it like a normal combat. But here's the important part. You have more flexibility because you are both GM and player, so that you can bring in more people. If the combat's going super easy, more people come out. That's GM always has that, right? That bring in reinforcement. But you can make it interesting, and this is true for Cyberpunk in general. Make it interesting. Use the environment. When you shoot someone, if you miss, that bullet goes somewhere. What happens to that bullet? Does it break glass? Does it puncture a gas tank and do a Hollywood? Because we all know, because we watch Mythbusters, that actually shooting a gas tank in a car does not cause the car to explode. But in Cyberpunk, it could, because that's fun. That kind of thing. Does it shoot down a power line and now there's a sparking? Basically make it more interesting. And that when you make combat more interesting with more environmental effects, more tactical events, you think about it like a video game, right? When you're starting off early on, it's just like you and the bad guys, and it's pretty simple. But as you get further in stages, they come up with different ways to use the environment to make the gameplay more interesting.
Yeah.
Do the same thing.
There's a couple parallels that come to mind with what you described. One of them is not to reference Hard Boiled again, but the Tea House shootout. If you've seen that movie, you may remember the Tea House shootout, where even if everyone's just using pistols, you've got plates and cups getting smashed, furniture getting torn apart. The whole place starts getting dusty, almost foggy, just from all the stuff that's getting completely wrecked in the place. And
no, that's all. Yeah, no, that those are all great effects.
Yeah, and the other thing that instantly comes to mind is what was referred to as 30 seconds of fun by one of the lead developers over at Bungie back in the day. And people have misinterpreted what he meant when he said that. He said if you can come up with 30 seconds of fun, you can stretch that out into a whole game. But a lot of people took him too literally, and he's been very vocal on how frustrated he was that what he said wasn't interpreted proper. The intent was a loop that can be repeated with context. And think of say Combat Evolved. You start out with these very confined shootouts in the Pillar of Autumn. Then you land on Halo and you have firefights in more open areas. Then you start having firefights where vehicles are introduced. Then you start having firefights with new types of opponents that you have to juggle with. It's the same combat loop, but because something is added or changed with it, it changes how you approach it.
In very ancient video game terms, it was called shrinking the paddles, because that's what you did to make Pong more interesting was you sped up the ball or you made the paddle smaller. You came up with new ways to make the game more challenging, or at least different. And do that with Cyberpunk. One of the great things about single player mode is, if there was if you're ever seeing they're playing a game and saying, hey, I thought this would be cool, but you're not the GM, so you can't run that particular thing. Now you can. Give it a try. And if you're the GM and you're wondering how well it will work for your next game, grab single player mode and run that combat out. Use your player characters. Try to play as your players would. Run the bad guys as you run this, and you have a way to test the system.
I remember Robin Laws saying, if things are getting gory, just add ninjas. Obviously, you can't do ninjas per se in Cyberpunk, but you could just as easily have things get more complicated by say a rival gang showing up, like the Tigers or something, just biking right in and making the whole situation worse.
Oh yeah, sure. What happens if if one of the guys you kill has a trauma team card? What happens if NCPD shows up? What happens if a gang hears it comes screaming in? What happens if there's like a random cyber psycho attack? There's a lot of things you can do. But yeah, always never be afraid to mix it up. But yeah, but getting back to the answer, the answer is that single player mode works just like full Cyberpunk, because it is full Cyberpunk. It is just with guidelines for solo play.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, since Cyberpunk is a game that's always going to lean into a mission design, one of the things I'm curious about is, if someone wanted to do like random missions, and there's plenty of random mission generators out there, even within the book, would it be relatively easy to do that thing, or even convert an existing mission that's already out for any edition of Cyberpunk to this?
So certainly you could play an existing mission. The scream sheets might be a little easier to play, because the scream sheets essentially are bullet points where you want to hit these points, but we don't plan out every encounter. Playing a full adventure like, say, Tales of Red Hope Reborn and stuff, that gets a little trickier, because it assumes because essentially you have to read ahead, and so you spoil things for yourself. One of the great things about the way single player mode is set up with those random mission generators is you're not spoiling yourself. You don't know what the mission is, and what the twists are until they come up, and then you get to decide and work that out and tell the story. With an existing mission, a fully written mission, you do have to read ahead, and so you lose a little bit of that random surprise element. But you could still surprise yourself, because you are going to come up with ways to something that Mike has said is no mission, no adventure survives contact with players. Which is true, because I've run, for example, con games where I've run multiple instances of the same adventure. I've never had it go the same way twice, and almost never does it go the way I planned out the adventure to go. We work really hard to try to anticipate a lot of what players do, but there's 1,000,000 permutations. And so, if you are coming across, say, we expect you to climb up the wall or climb up the elevator shaft, and you decide, nah, I'm going to go and I'm going to steal a helicopter and go down from the roof. That is something we didn't plan for. And so now you are once again getting into that, oh, well, you're outside the written parameters of the mission, so go for it. So it's a good chance to, it's a good chance to do that and to adapt to new situations. It works with written missions. Keep that in mind that you may have to adjust depending on how many people are in your party, and you will have to spoil yourself in order to run it. You can't just I'm going to play this beat and not read the next beat and then go to the next beat. It can't work like a choose your own adventure. You've got to know what's coming in order to play the adventure, which is an unfortunate truth. But as you come up with wacky ideas inspired on the moment, because solo play is all about improv, you will leave the mission parameters, and it'll become random and interesting in that way again. If you're doing random missions, you are right. There's an entire system for generating random missions in single player mode, using the beat chart system that's in the core rulebook, and it is pretty neat, if I do say so myself. Peter Norton did an amazing job writing it. You've got your mission types, you've got your hooks, you've got ways to decide who gives you the mission. You've got twists, because no mission should ever be straightforward. So it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. And to me personally, that's where single player mode shines, is by working with you to create adventures you can't anticipate, because those parts are random. and sparked from your imagination in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and when I look at the clock system now, I'm no stranger to clocks in RPGs. We've had that for a while with things like Blades in the Dark and the many things that have spawned off of Blades in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse. You get the idea. But one of the interesting things that isn't in a lot of those clock systems that we have here is having it be based on a die pool instead of just constantly going up or down depending on context. Whose idea was it to add the die pool?
That was Peter's. So yeah, your Blades in the Dark clocks are very cool. It's a very simple graphic system. That's essentially a countdown clock. Every time X happens, you mark off a piece of the clock, and when the clock is full, blah happens.
Mm-hmm.
In Cyberpunk Red in the past, with especially Hope Reborn, we use what I call static clocks, which is not quite the same. It is on round 1 this happens, round 2 this happens, round 3 this happens. For example, in a building that's on fire, at round 5 the fire spreads, and round 6 part of the building falls in, that sort of thing. And we've done it with both rounds and with time in a countdown, which is like you have 9 hours now. You have this task takes half an hour. Now you have 8.5 hours. This task takes half an hour. You take 8. What Peter developed were randomized clocks. Now, one of the tricks of a clock system in single player mode is that if you're using a more traditional clock system, you know what's coming. You know exactly what's going to happen. There's no surprise in it. And anyone who's ever been to an improv comedy show knows the best parts of the show come from the surprise and the unknown. If you ever watch Whose Line Is It Anyway? There's a reason why they get suggestions from the audience. Yeah. And so with the clock system, basically what happens is you say, okay, I have a dice pool of, say, 5d6s. And every time I make a, say, basic tech skill check, I roll the dice and I remove any die from the pool that comes up 1. When I reach 0, the building collapses. And that creates, the circumstances in which the dice pool, the clock may advance, but you don't know for sure if the clock is going to advance because that's all down to the dice. And so that creates an element of uncertainty. So for example, in Hope Reborn, say we have a 20 round clock. If you do not finish doing certain things within 20 rounds, you die for whatever reason. Something blows up. I don't tell the players that you have 20 rounds. That clock is for GM guidance. So the GM knows that on round 1 this happens, round 2 this happens, round 3 this happens. And if you're all by yourself and that takes some of the tension. And watching a good thriller, a good drama, tension is what makes it fun. If you know that the person is going to make it through the haunted house alive, it's not as exciting. Mm-hmm. So the randomness through the clocks that the system that Peter so expertly wrote, creates a tension because that you can't not know, because you are both GM and a player in this, but you cannot know. You know for sure that if the clock hits 0, the dice pool is 0, no dice, the building will collapse. But you don't know how many rounds it's going to take. You could roll 3 1s in that first round, that first roll, and suddenly you're down to 2 dice.
Oh yeah,
and those 2 dice could last 5 rounds because you keep rolling, because you only have a 1 in 6 chance on each die. So, so it's like, oh, wow, I've got to get through the building to my friend, grab my friend who's unconscious and bleeding, drag them out before they hit 0 or they're dead. And this really ramps up that tension because you don't know if you have 1 round, 5 rounds, 10 rounds. You won't know until the dice tell you.
And by having it by dice, you remove the whole we've got plenty of time kind of thing.
Yes.
Keeping that kind of urgency, because even if like in the good old story of there's a bomb here, and it'll go off in 2 hours. Nobody goes, we got 2 hours. We can take our time. It was like, no, we need to find that thing now. We need to find that thing now, because how do we know the person saying that it's got 2 hours is telling the truth,
or was good at their job,
and
set the bomb up correctly? And that is one of the so there's a disconnect with turn-based combat versus reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or role-playing time versus in-game time versus after in-game time.
Right.
In-game, every round is 3 seconds, and 3 seconds is not a lot of time. Out of game, a round can be several minutes, and so you don't feel that same sense of urgency. This restores that. And by the way, this clock system is great to throw into combat. Because say, for example, you have a 3d6 clock, and when that clock hits 0, trauma team comes in with their minigun blazing. Mm-hmm. And the combat gets a whole lot more complicated. And you roll those dice, you roll the pool every time at the top of every combat round. And so maybe you have 3 rounds to take down, to get through the goons and steal their boss and kidnap their boss. Maybe you have 5 rounds. Maybe you have 1 round. You don't know, and that makes the combat much more exciting.
Yeah. Obviously, someone could play a probability, like the odds of getting if it's a 3-round thing, the odds of getting nothing but snake eyes is 0.4%. But
right,
we've all had at least one case. Some of us have been that case of somebody thinking, this is an easy roll, and then they completely botch it.
Well, that's why, and that's why they're games, right? Because if going back to the choose your own adventures, if we just wanted it to be, just a path, we read choose your own adventures instead of Lone Wolf. If we just wanted a story that we knew the direction and not have to worry about it, we'd write fan fiction. But we're role players, and so we game, and gaming requires an element of randomization or gameplay of some kind to make the outcome uncertain.
Yeah, a game in a role-playing game. Real hard-hitting analysis on my part.
Oh no, but it's true. And you can run the odds, but the nice thing about dice is, the chances of you running multiple ones in a single roll are pretty low, but they're not non-existent. So you're really deciding how much you want to gamble.
And I have always said that the dice gods, no matter your background, hate you.
Yeah, if it was that easy, craps wouldn't be something they have at casinos, because everyone would win all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and like I said, I've seen folk, and I've had that one person at several tables who just seems to be cursed when it comes to the dice. No matter what, whenever it matters, they always roll poorly until it doesn't matter, to the point where nobody wants to be anywhere near their hands when it comes to their dice, because they think they're cursed.
Yeah, no, it is true. Anybody who's played games long enough runs into, I think, starts to believe in the higher powers of the dice gods.
You've probably heard the expression, "There are no atheists in foxholes." I think that can be applied to sports bars and gaming tables.
Yeah, no, I see. I get that. No, It's true.
Truth is often the strangest comedy. But with that kind of thing, with that in mind, I think one of the other elephants in the room that I do have to kind of address is net running. Since that can be one of those things that can take up long stretches of time. So how do you handle net running so that it's able to fit within the parameters that you have for single player mode?
So the couple things there. I think with net running and single player and Cyberpunk Red in general, if you know your rules, and the GM, because this is true of spellcasting in D&D, if you have to look up your spell every time, and the GM has to look up your spell, and you have to take a moment to figure out what the spell does and how the spell works, spell casting slows down everything. If you know how the spell works, and the GM knows how the spell works, spell casting goes fast. So if you know your rules for net running and the GM knows the rules for net running, it goes faster. Just like if you have a specialized weapon that does something unique, if you know the rules, the GM knows the rules, it goes faster.
Yeah.
I don't think net running in general, it takes more spotlight time if people understand how the rules work than, say, when your fixer or your rocker boy goes to socially interact with the bartender to get information, and they play out the scene. I think that's fine. That being said, I'm going to point something out. You're not slowing down the game for anyone when you net run in single player mode, because the only person who's waiting on you is you. So I'm going to point that out first. The common, they call it the pizza problem is like, oh, it's time for the net run. Everyone else can't do anything, so let's go get a pizza. There's no one else. No one else can get a pizza needs to get a pizza because it's just you. So again, we have a quick and dirty net running system in single player mode that truncates net running. It is good and useful. It's great for what I call incidental net runs. Like, okay, I decide that I want to get in the building, and I decide the door has a net architecture, and I do a quick net. It's got 3 floors, and I do a quick net run, and I don't need to play it out as a long, thing where I have to whittle down the black ice in order to get to the door. I just use the quick and dirty system. I get it done much quicker. It removes a lot of the long-term consequence of a more in-depth net run, because it basically moves it down to a series of skill checks, which is just fine. But it removes a lot of the combat systems, and it's less interesting in my eyes. So I don't recommend it for longer net runs again, both quick and dirty systems, quick and dirty combat, quick and dirty net running. I don't recommend for plot relevant, scene important. If this were going to be an important scene in a movie, if this were going to be a critical scene upon which the plot turns, I would not use those systems for that scene. If it was going to be like, oh, I'm going to do a real quick thing, I'm going to show a quick graphic, of numbers floating in front of the guy's eyes, and the door's going to unlock, use the system. But yeah, my big thing is that the biggest problem anybody has with net running is not at all a problem when you're playing by yourself, because there is no one else that has to wait for you to finish before they can play the game.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, when it came to handling Cyberpunk Red in this single player mode, were there any concepts within the core rules of Red that were a little bit trickier to implement in solo play, or was it mostly smooth sailing?
Like I said, yeah, it is just fine. There is I don't think there's anything for the core rulebooks. And this is, like I said, this is not designed to replace anything in the core rulebook. It just floats over it. It's additional guidance. So yeah, no, there was nothing that was particularly difficult at all to put in. It actually flows really easily. The nice thing about Cyberpunk in general is Cyberpunk is a relatively simple system at its core. It's 1d10 plus stat plus skill versus a number or another check. So no, it worked just fine. There was no, you can do this in the core, you can do this in table play, but you cannot do this in solo play. There was none of that. Peter did a really good job of figuring out how the two work together, and so it feels that way now. Yeah, no, I can't really think of anything. The biggest thing is just being willing to not always be surprised, or to be willing to tell the story and stick to your choices even if they feel bad at the moment.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now with that in mind, I know you have the whole thing of DLC PDFs every month. Are there plans in the future to have certain DLCs that lean into single player mode, not exclusively, but maybe in a side column or something?
It's a possibility. I think single player mode's fairly comprehensive as it is. As pointed out in single player mode itself, there are DLCs that come with. So single player mode has pages upon pages of tables, because that's how what we call the open oracle works. Is when you have a question that is not yes or no, say, who is the mysterious man who keeps calling my apartment and hanging up? That is not a yes/no question. So I would go, for example, I might go to the tables involving people and use those tables to generate that NPC. And many of our DLCs, we release them free online at our website and on DriveThruRPG each month, have tables which can be useful with single player mode. For example, Night City Weather has tables for determining what the weather in Night City is. And that's useful. That's not in single player mode, but you may want to know if it's raining. We have something called Digital Dating in the Dark Future, which is literally about finding, getting, and what you do on a date. It's like an entire side story through a series of charts. You might want to add that. We have Gun Path in the supplement called the DLC called Toggle's Temple, which is for creating random guns. The manufacturer, the gun name, and what kind of gun it is. So we have all these additional tables in our DLC, which can be used in conjunction with single player mode. And all those rules and lists, every DLC can be used with it. Whether there's going to be more single player specific content is up in the air. The truth is we tend to plan out DLCs about 2 to 3 months in advance. And right now it is not in the works, but that doesn't mean it won't be in the future.
I can certainly get that.
Yeah, I know what's going on through the end of December, and I don't know what's going to happen in January quite yet. So people have certainly responded well to single player mode. We're not going to create content just to create content. If we come up with a really good idea, we will do something. But other than that, the basic thesis of single player mode from our standard is that it works with everything Cyberpunk Red has to offer. So theoretically, everything for Cyberpunk Red is for single player mode too.
Yeah, and I will most certainly look forward to that.
Yeah.
But
yay.
With that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
It was a grueling journey, but it was worth it at the end.
Yeah, it's always winter around my monastery, which some people have a problem with. I just say stop complaining and put more layers on.
It's fair. Get some pocket warmers.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ torn.